After a few months of investigation, the World Bank announced on Monday that the bank cannot substantiate allegations that part of its $50 million in loans to China's Xinjiang had been used for other purposes. In an August story, the New York Times suggested the loan had been used to fund so-called Muslim detention camps, a term China has consistently rejected. However, the World Bank said it would reduce the scope of the loan by less than 1% because the schools receiving this part of the loan are widely dispersed and difficult to monitor. So what exactly is the story? Joining me for the discussion in our Beijing studio again is Wang from Global Times and Professor Gong of the University of International Business and Economics. But a little bit of background information here before we start the discussion. So according to the World Bank official website, the Xinjiang Technical and Vocational Education and Training Project is a program funded by the World Bank to improve the quality and relevance of project schools to produce student skills that respond to the labor market needs in Xinjiang. So the project comprises of two components. One is called School-Based Reforms and Innovations. The second is about provincial policy development, school twinning partnership, monitoring and evaluation and project management. So it is under the second component, especially the school twinning partnership, that there are these funds that were put into question associated with the World Bank. So in August, as I said, New York Times published a report citing a letter by hawkish U.S. senators questioning the use of these funds, of these loans in Xinjiang, asking for proof that the bank's money was not being misused for involuntary attainment under the guise of vocational education, and claims were also made suggesting that the school was spending money on security items used against minority groups. Claims, I say, which are all allegations once again. So the bank then started an investigation which led to the conclusion that such allegations cannot be substantiated. After investigation, the statement from the World Bank says on Monday that the team conducted a thorough review of project documents, engaged in discussions with project staff, and visited schools directly financed by the project as well as their partner schools that were the subject of allegations. The review did not substantiate the allegations. So let's be absolutely clear. Exactly what is the World Bank statement saying, John?
I think the World Bank the report is a very polite way of saying no, that's just total nonsense. There's no evidence so far, and just for the sake of it, we're going to scale back a little bit just for just to be safe. I think that's just essentially the message. I think the bottom line is that there's no evidence so far, and this allegation is totally groundless. Not surprising to see that the allegation is coming from this very famous U.S. senator from Florida, Marco Rubio. So he's always been like this. He's all over the place when it comes to China, and again he's barking on to the wrong tree, and isn't finding any evidence in this report.
Right. Okay. This open letter was initiated by Marco Rubio and also another senator by the name of Jim McGovern, who has also been very hawkish on China and suggested misuse of such funds, requesting three things in that letter. For instance, information on whether the World Bank investigate whether its money was being used to fund these so-called camps, and second, whether any minority teachers at the World Bank assisted schools have been detained or put under any of these restrictions, and third, whether there are plans for the bank to stop supporting educational projects in Xinjiang. So basically the statement said, none of these are true.
True, that's right. I mean, there are so many things wrong with the whole process. Let's start with the findings. I mean, the World Bank statement is very clear.
The letter didn't list any evidence.
That's
it just
right.
says there are facts. There are
right.
evidence, but but they didn't list any. They just say, are you going to do this?
That's right. And then it says clearly states that the findings does not substantiate the allegations. And then you see in the media reports, that's not what they reported on. What they reported on the decision that they will scale back some of the fundings or the project. However, what I take issue the most is that how this process was started initially. Let's not forget, the World Bank is a multilateral organization where, you know, China and many other countries hold stakes. It's not a part of the U.S. government.
No.
For example, if this was the U.S. You know, Agency for International Development, USAID, then yes, a senator, you know, in the United States Congress can write a letter and start that. So it's just, you know, preposterous to even start such a process.
Basically, if China has any suspicion about any smoking gun in the United States, China could also go and say, hey, World Bank, you have to do an investigation on this and this and this and this. We heard this and this and this. Well, you know, every country who contribute to World Bank full of funds.
Yeah, will they follow up on
this
that?
has a lot, in my opinion, there's a lot to do with the fact that historically the World Bank has been under control of the United States government. The governor, I'm sorry, the what is it called? The director, I think, of the bank has always been appointed by the current administration. Mr. David Malpass is a Trump nominee. So I think you know, he has a lot of influence in this, and certainly being coming from the Republican Party, he certainly takes notice of a lot of.
Is there some kind of abuse of power here too? Because, you know, because the head of the World Bank is an American, so when American senators say, hey, I have some question, I have some doubts, then, you know, the bank goes and do an investigation. What about, as I said, what about China says, hey, I have some problem with something else in the United States?
I would imagine there got to be a process.
Will the head of the World Bank also say, yes, let's do it, because one of our donors, one of our stakeholders is asking for that?
I would imagine there got to be some process in place where you have to follow the procedure, right? You know, what's the process? This report doesn't say much. I'm not very familiar with it.
And also, you know, when you make an allegation, you know, the burden of proof is on the one who is accusing, you know, and now the World Bank has to do a review, which obviously costs money, and, you know, who's going to pay for that? The stakeholders. And then also, in essence, you know, you mentioned that should every country, even they make allegation, they follow up. This with Marco Rubio, this is, I think, in essence, it's similar to what Mr. Trump, President Trump, is under investigating for. For example, when he comes to China, you know, like Professor said, he's all over the place. He's using this. He's abusing his power and abusing the World Bank, using the World Bank to investigate, just to make a political gain. Because, you know, obviously he's, you know, taking another run maybe at the presidential elections, and they use this for his own political gain, because, you know, to do this investigation, it's a point to him within the United States, you know, political environment.
Yeah, John, your take?
No, I totally agree. I think there got to be a process in place that why this investigation started, right, and how it can be done, and what procedures to follow. This is not very opaque to the outsiders.
It's not very clear.
It's not very clear. The New York Times report doesn't mention anything about this process. So I'm a little bit skeptical as to the, you know, whether there's a due process here. Whether Mr. Malpass was taking a position that is very much on behalf of not just the United States government. Actually, it's one senator in the Senate.
That's right.
So
two senators.
Two senators. So this is a little bit bothering to me. Whether the impartiality of the World Bank's stance is very much in doubt.
You know, of course, the World Bank is a multilateral organization, and the United States has been traditionally the largest donor, so they do have more say in that matter. But, you know, in any decision-making process, how do you decide whether to investigate this one or that one? And what you said about, you know, if I have any suspicion against anybody, I can just go and say, I suspect you're doing this. Now, you prove to me that you are innocent. And that's the kind of thing that has been happening to China almost non-stop.
That's right.
Burden of proof.
Yeah, the burden of proof. It's upside down.
Yeah,
it's upside down. You know, this is.
Yeah. Also, that's why we mentioned, you know, because China has been proposing, not just China, you know, emerging markets. You know, the BRICS summit in Brazil. Now, that's what we've been talking about. That the World Bank and other multilateral organizations need some reform. That taking more, you know, more.
Emerging countries
more emerging countries, developing countries. You can't just, they're not donor. United States is not a donor to the World Bank. They're a stakeholder. You know, it's a different thing. Their money is in there, not just, you know, to give it away. They're making, you know, making
Returns.
returns. So it's a little bit different. It's like a company, you know. It's, you know, you can't just decide because you're the biggest.
Okay. So
Another point I want to make is that any evidence, why would they scale back, right? I mean, that's a question that's very bothering.
So this part is also being blown up, you know.
That's right,
Some newspaper is using this part as some kind of evidence that China did something wrong. For instance, the World Bank did say, and I'm going to read it out to you, did say that it's going to scale back one component of its project involving partner schools, which are affiliated with the 5 schools that the bank is directly funding, but that part only benefits from less than 1% of the bank's financing. And the statement says, in light of the risks associated with the partner schools, which are widely dispersed, Xinjiang is a very big place, and difficult to monitor, the scope and footprint of the project is being reduced. Specifically, the project component that involves the partner schools in Xinjiang is being closed. But somehow that is being interpreted as some kind of very politically significant development.
What that statement essentially says is that the World Bank doesn't give people the benefit of the doubt. It's assuming that it's going to have some problems, it's going to be too difficult to monitor, and we're going to stop this. So, you know, this is a totally upsided logic here. You would be able to go in and assume people's innocence first, right? Assuming that this is a good program. If you find issues, you find problems, you scale back and take actions against it. But now it's saying, well, you know, it's complicated, it's too many schools involved, we can't monitor, we don't have the resources to do this, and we're going to scale back. So this kind of a logic is very bothering. It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. So, but what kind of effect is such a statement going to have on the people who have a habit, you know, have an impulse to point fingers
absolutely
on China?
nothing. That's why, I don't even want to focus on the media report of the statement of the findings, because that's what you expect. I mean, I was reading the statement. What I see was just a couple words that it doesn't substantiate the allegation.
Yeah.
But I knew that, you know, all the media reports, you know, the Financial Times, the Reuters, New York Times, they're just going to focus on that part.
Yeah,
and then
the
there's
part
no
that's going to be
evidence.
reduced,
That's right,
although it is less than 1%. Well, you know, what are we going to do about it? But keep talking about it. We'll keep talking about it. Thank you so much to my guests, Wang from Global Times and Gong from the University of International Business and Economics.